are going to be talking about the triangular trade. We're going to be talking about the Middle Passage, which was a part of that, and we're going to be talking about slavery. The first thing I'm going to do is show you a video clip of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, when you're watching videos over slavery, you are often going to see people that, they're very loosely dressed, kind of. Males are just covered at the bottoms. You're going to see some. That's it right there. You're going to see cruelty to other people, some things that aren't very nice, some things that are hard to watch. The thing is you need to be mature about this video. There's nothing bad in this video. This is not but I'm just putting it out there from the future and now that when we watch video clips, you need to be mature about what you're seeing. Okay? Somebody wants to turn off the lights.
If we talk about slavery, we can talk about institutions that have existed for millennia.
Slavery wasn't invented when Europeans discovered Africa. Slavery is as old as civilization itself. Whether it was in ancient Egypt, whether it was in ancient Greece, whether it was in ancient Rome, or in Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, and Angola. Slavery has been constant in human history.
What we need to remember, I think, is market mechanisms, supply, demand, warlords who are willing to supply, and slave traders who supply the demand. This is something that happens all over the world, and it happened in very large numbers in West Central Africa when the Portuguese first came. When Europe encountered Africa in terms of slavery, they encounter indigenous systems of captive labor or slavery. And there's a way in which they are able to tap into existing networks and gain slaves. But there's a very important distinction to be made in terms of the forms of captive labor that Africans participated in with each other versus what would become the Atlantic slave trade.
What I find relatively unique about the period of the enslavement of Africans is that this notion of dehumanizing is not because that other is a threat to you, but because that other does not deserve the treatment you would require. And I put this to service to produce profits. In other words, to increase wealth.
Slavery was a business. It was an investment. It was a part of the economy. To own a slave was to own a valuable commodity.
The industrialization of slavery is something that's new to the history of the world in that period.
They were economic chattel, investments that were absolutely key to whatever enterprise you use it for.
The active slave trade was a conspiracy, unfortunately, between avaricious Europeans and avaricious African elites. Without the two working in harmony, the slave trade could not possibly have manifested itself in the way that it did. It's one of the most horrendous, painful moments in modern human history.
That's awesome. Did you hear that? This is perfect. Look at this.
Okay, so from this video, you can see that slavery is not new, or was not new at this time. Can somebody turn the lights back on? Can you think, slavery's been around forever. If you read the Bible, you know slavery's been around forever. What's it? Anybody know a story in the Bible where they talked about slavery?
The Israelites.
Okay. Everybody push this up.
They stuck in your shirt.
there's slavery that still continues throughout the world today. It's not a new thing, or it wasn't a new thing to the colonists at this time. It's something that had been around with different groups throughout the world for a long time. When we are talking about slavery at the point in time that we're going to be talking about it today, we are talking about when it was kind of first newly introduced into the Americas. A lot of times when we think about slavery, we're thinking of the time right before the American Revolution. Right before the Civil War. Okay, so we're talking about when it was first kind of introduced to the Americas. We will get to that part of slavery later. At this time, it is legal to slave trade. That means to take slaves from one place and buy them and sell them in another place. So at this time where we are, it was legal to do that. We know that there were slaves brought over in Jamestown. We know Jamestown was founded in 1607 when John Rolfe brought over the tobacco, and they began to grow the tobacco crop. The first Africans were brought over at that time and worked in the tobacco fields. When we talk about slaves being emancipated and the Civil War and all that, we're talking like 1864, 1865. So there's a big gap between when it was first introduced and when it was over. Slavery lasted for a long time. Like the video said, if it wouldn't have been for the elitist, African elitists at this time, the slave trade would not have been so successful. By the wealthy and the rich of Africa selling and trading slaves and capturing slaves in Africa and making deals with Europeans, the Spanish and Portuguese and everybody else with Europeans to sell people. Slaves. So we're going to read about slavery first, and then we're going to do some activities with all this chaos that's in the room. So you need to turn to page, I think it's 137. Okay, so we're going to start on the growth of slavery. And then we are going to read over to 139. I want us to go reading to go a little bit faster today. So we're going to read out loud. I'm going to read some too instead of us reading silently because we need to be able to get to our activity. So I'm going to start with the growth of slavery. It says, by the time Europeans were selling to the Americans, slavery was widely practiced in West Africa. Many West African kingdoms enslaved those they defeated in war. Slave traders from Arab lands bought some of these enslaved people. Others were forced to work in gold mines or farm in fields. The European colonization of the Americas created new demands for enslaved workers. Colonists needed workers for their plantations. West African slave traders met this need, selling captives they gained through the wars and raids. The transatlantic slave trade brought millions of Africans to the Americas. Slavery and the slave trade became major parts of the colonial economy. For enslaved Africans, the voyage to America usually began with the march to the European port on the West African coast. There they were sold to Europeans who loaded them on ships. So we know this was a big money market, right? They weren't capturing slaves or Africans and bringing them over as slaves for free. They were making a lot of money off of each person that they sold. And the bigger they were, the more fit they were, and the stronger they were, the more money they were. Okay, who wants to read the middle passage? Okay, go ahead.
The Middle Passage. The trip across the ocean was called the Middle Passage. This name came from the fact that it was often the middle leg of the compartment known as the triangular trade. People called this route triangular because the ships traveled between their destinations and passed formed three sides of the triangle.
wanted them to eat? Yeah, that's money. And people did die on the way over. But they wanted them to eat. They whipped them if they didn't because that was money they would lose. If somebody died on the way over there or they were sick and puny and miserable, were people going to buy them? No. They wanted them to stay healthy, which there was very little food. And not food with nutrients in it that they needed to keep them healthy. So they got sick anyways, but they wanted them to eat. They punched them if they didn't because they wanted to make money off of them. Okay, life under slavery. Kyle?
Some enslaved African plantations did housework, but most worked in the fields. Many enslaved people suffered great cruelty. Owners of large plantations hired overseers or bosses to keep the enslaved Africans working hard. Many colonies had slave codes, rules governing the behavior and punishment of enslaved people. Some didn't allow enslaved workers to leave the plantation without enslavement written permission. Some made it illegal to teach enslaved people to read or write. Enslaved people were seldom allowed to move without freedom and valid and punishment. Punishments ranged from whipping or even minor misdeeds to hanging or burning to death or more serious crimes. Enslaved persons who ran away were punished severely when caught. Although enslaved Africans had strong early times, their families were often torn apart when slaveholders espoused political power. Many of the enslaved found strength in their African roots. They developed a culture that drew on the languages, customs, and religions of their African homelands. Some enslaved Africans learned trades such as carpentry, blacksmithing, or weaving. Skilled workers could sometimes set up shops, sharing their profits with the slaveholders. Those lucky enough to be able to buy them freedom from a small population of free African Americans.
Okay, at this time, too, there were also critics of slavery. Let's go ahead and read that. Not all colonists believed in slavery. Many Puritans, for example, refused to hold people in slavery. In Pennsylvania, Quakers and Mennonites condemned slavery. Eventually, the debate over slavery would spark a bloody war between the North and the South. Yes?
Okay. So let's say I lived in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't I just go buy the slaves and just set them free?
I guess, possibly. But, I mean, you would have to be just extremely compassionate about that because are you going to spend the money to do that? A lot of people didn't necessarily believe in it, and they didn't think it was right, and they didn't think it was good, and it was horrible, and they were against it. But most likely weren't going to go spend their money to do something like that. Now, maybe there were people that did. But when we start getting closer to the Civil War and start talking about that slavery, abolitionists they did try to help in slavery. Okay, so we know that in the triangular trade, we know that they were moving goods, and we now know that they were moving people as well. Oh, you are making me. There's not very many people in here. What is this? What is this place right here where they basically were shipping slaves through? What leg? What was the leg called of the triangular trade? What? Middle Passage. So this would be this area right here, from Africa over to this area. This would be considered our Middle Passage. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to look at your picture that I gave you. Then I want you to look at your map on 138. Look and see where you originated from. Once you have discovered or figured out where you originated from, you need to go stand in that area, either the West Indies, the 13 colonies, Great Britain, or Africa. Watch the yarn, don't clothesline itself. If you're West Indies, go on this side so you're not mixed in with the 13 colonies. I should have moved the West Indies down a little bit, maybe some more room. Okay, so let's talk about this. First of all, I want you to make this connection. a part of Great Britain. Okay? So we got to keep that in mind. This is British colonies, which makes it a part of Great Britain. Yes? Okay. So let's look at this. If you are rice, tobacco, indigo, and fur, you should be in the colonies. Raise your hand if you're rice, tobacco, indigo, or fur. If you're rice, tobacco, indigo, or fur, raise your hand high. Okay, I need you to be transported to Great Britain. Okay? You're transported to Great Britain. And then I need you to have a seat on the floor if you're transported to Great Britain. If you're rice, indigo, tobacco, or fur. Now, let's talk about this. When we were talking about exploration, and we were talking about the 3Gs and all these things, and we were talking about how the Spanish were spreading Catholicism and the French were fur trading, what did we say the British, the English liked? Wanted. What did they want? Natural resources. And remember, when they established these 13 colonies over here, there was an abundance of resources that they did not have. And so those goods that they just transferred or transported from the 13 colonies over to Great Britain were a form of natural resources, whether it was run from the fertile soil, whether it was something that they, whatever. So what they would do is once they got it here to Great Britain, they would manufacture those goods, those natural resources. And they would create manufactured goods and cloth and things like that. So then, if you are manufactured goods or cloth in Great Britain, you are going to go to the West Indies. So they took natural resources from the colonies, they took them to Great Britain, they manufactured them, and they shipped them over to the West Indies in that area. Okay, so now, if y'all been transported, or if y'all been, y'all can sit. So now we have, we're making money. Okay, we're making money because we're now selling manufactured goods. What vocabulary word that we've talked about that this week is that an example of? Export. Well, yeah, that's export. But what else? By taking from the mother country, taking from the colonies, taking from natural resources. Mercantilism. Good. That's an example of mercantilism. You take your natural resources from your mother country, takes your natural resources, they take them back, they manufacture them, and then they sell them back to where the areas where they got them. Okay? Okay, so now if you are cloth and manufactured goods. Who are you? Okay, I need to just sneak back over to Great Britain because we really needed to with this. So sneak back over there. Okay, so now if you are sugar, molasses, and fruit, raise your hand. Okay, sugar, molasses, and fruit, you are now going to be exported to the West Indies. Get to the West side. West Indies over here. Okay, now, not only did Great Britain ship manufactured goods and cloth over to the West Indies, they are also going to do the same to Africa. So manufactured goods and cloth are going to Africa. Okay? Rum, iron, and tools. Rum, iron, and tools, where are you? Rum, iron, and tools, you're supposed to be in Africa. No, you're not. Rum, iron, and tools, I'm sorry, are being shipped from the colonies to Africa. Where's molasses? Molasses, you're now being shipped to the 13 colonies. Have you completed your triangle, I believe? Okay. Now there was something else that was happening. We know that all these goods were being transported and moved around, and the whole idea of import and export, the whole idea of mercantilism, making money. The other thing that they were shipping and moving back and forth were people, were slaves. So what I want you to do is I want you to orderly walk, and every one of you get inside the boat. You have to be all the way in the boat. You cannot be hanging out of the boat. You're out of the boat. There's some room in the boat over here.
People at the front, right?
Over there. That means you're not in the boat.
That's not in the boat. He pushed me out of the boat.
Okay, get back in the boat. That is my ship's captain. That's not okay. So are you on the boat up there? Honestly, you're not taking off because I don't have my.
I'm on the boat.
Okay, so and hey, there's not very many of you all. I've had this boat full of like 26 people today.
Whoa.
Alright, everybody's
Okay, so I want y'all to. I'm gonna make a boat a little smaller. I want y'all to all stretch together. You're pushing people out of the boat. Get in.
You guys,
Okay, Mecca, how many people are on your boat, Mecca?
What?
Hiding.
17.
Oh my goodness, Carl, how much on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Okay, so there's 14 people on your boat. Okay, so this is the deal. You're going to spend about a month on this boat cramped together. Some may have clothes on, some may not. How many people have to go to the restroom, raise your hand?
Oh, Loki, yeah.
I know that y'all go to the restroom every day in this series. Okay, so where are you going to the restroom at if you're on this boat?
No, wait.
On this. Where are you going to the restroom at if you're on this boat? Okay, listen. So you gotta go to the they had to go to the restroom. They had to go where they were. They were packed in here, row by row by row, packed. There were usually several decks to these boats. So, oh, here, we can ask the boats. Okay, you're pushing people onto the boat. Okay, listen. Okay, so if you've been on here about a month, if you have to go to the bathroom, you gotta go where you are. They're cramped up. There's decks. You're on the bottom deck, so if you look up about right here, there's another deck, and these are wood plank floors that got gashes through them. So those people above you are going to the restroom too. So all of that would be falling down upon you, right?
I want to be on the top.
You have a woman that's about to give birth. Where do you think that's going to happen?
I'm not gonna survive.
Okay, there was not the idea of Dove deodorant or Old Spice or Axe or whatever you wear. There was not deodorant. So people are hot and sweaty. People have now, they're kind of starving and they're dehydrated, and your body does weird stuff when you're dehydrated, and so now people are getting sick, and so they're throwing up and other things all around you. You're hungry, and Mecca's your ship captain. He's going to feed you, but he's really not going to put much effort into that, so he will pretty much feed the people you can get to. Y'all stand right You cannot eat the ship captain. Because they're doing this to you, what would you do to them?
I'll take the living crap out of all of them.
What? He would probably beat you. So this is the deal. So you've been on the ship for about a month. You're about to hit your first port. Your first port is in the Caribbean. You are going to sell 50% of your passengers in the Caribbean. So you need to take 50% off of the boat and
Why
sell
you
it.
stay on the boat?
Alright, now this is how it's gonna work.
There's way
Venice
away.
and to the left, so Venice, Kyle,
No.
Reagan, EJ, Mariana, Leah,
Y'all need to go to over here to the west
and
Indies.
Emily.
Let's take a trade.
Okay, if I said your name, Venice, Reagan, Kyle, EJ,
What's your
Mariana, Emily, and Leah. Let's go. You got
Nah,
it.
bro. He wanted to stay on the boat. I wanted to stay on the boat, man.
Listen, they were a little excited to get off the boat, but do you know what's going to happen to you when you get off the boat?
As long as I got a place to use the restroom.
So now you've made a lot of money off of these people right here. So now you are going to sell to Brazil, and 33% of your passengers you're selling to Brazil. Whoa, that's a lot.
You better stop me. Oh yeah, I'll grab his hold. Okay, Mr. Hope, Evan, Lane.
John.
Okay, now listen to this. So now you are going to sell 12% of your passengers to Central and South America. And Brazil is in South America, so y'all will just go over there. To Central and South America. So 12%. One person.
Why would you want to stay on a boat?
And she's tall, so you're going to make a lot of money off her. Yes, the taller you are, I want you to understand this. So look at the West Indies. Look at how many people he sold in this area as slaves. And then look over in South and Central America and look at how many people he sold. Okay, listen. Mecca, you will sell only 5% of your passengers to, that's half of only 5% of your passengers to North America.
That's good right
Go to college. Okay, everybody look around. When we think about slavery, and we think about slavery in America, we think that they took everybody from Africa and shipped them all to the colonies, and we have this big old slavery. We had a lot of slaves, don't get me wrong. But look at the West Indies. Look at Central and South America. Where did the majority of them go? West Indies. Okay, when you think about Columbus discovering the Americas, where did he originally land? West Indies. This area over here. So that has a lot to do with, and remember, they enslaved the natives that were there already and had them working the land and all these things. So you people that are left in the boat, I'm sorry that you're dead. So you can see, okay, so you can see not everybody made it off the ship. So a lot of times, you might have died and got stuck down here and they just stepped over you to get off the boat. If they could pick you up and get you, if you weren't too far stepped back in the crowd, then they would try to pick you up and throw you overboard. My mentality of thinking is, I'm going to fake my death so they can throw me overboard and I can try to swim somewhere. You can't swim? I'm fighting for my life. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so you can see the transport of goods. We did the transport of goods. We did the transport of slaves. Okay, this area right here is called the what? Middle Passage. The Middle Passage. The Middle Passage is a part of the triangular trade. It's just the middle leg of it. Okay, slaves were a huge money maker. Yes, they made money off of imported goods and exported goods and all those kinds of things, but they made a lot of money off of the slaves. It was a big profit for the people that were selling them. So as you can imagine, they didn't want that to end. They wanted to keep getting richer and richer and richer and richer. And so slavery continued to grow. And not only did it continue to grow because of that, it continued to grow because the plantation system in the South continued to grow. And the more and more crops they planted and the more land they had, the more slaves they had. Yes?
Wait, if most of them were going to the West Indies, and the West Indies is small, then how did they fit them all in the West Indies?
Well, the West Indies was a lot of different islands and this is just our example. There's a lot of different islands and a lot of different areas that went around. Now, that's not to say that they traded from here to here as well. Okay? And it was this vicious cycle that continued Uh, what I want you to do, any other questions? Josh, how much time do we have? Mr. Holt, how much time do we have? Okay. Yes, you're 20 minutes, Josh. Honey, if you're right with the Lord, I guess you are. Or not. Okay, so what I want you to do, any questions about the triangular trade or the middle passage?
No, ma'am.
Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to bring me those papers that you have, and I want you to have a seat back in your desk.
Stinking rich off my people. Why would you want to select to record? Okay, how much money you made? Average price for a slave
That's it.
Also got these things, but I need things.
When they find me,
We should play a game with this one.
the whole other side.
Okay, I'm gonna put your zero. Sorry.
Hey, pass this up for me. Okay, you need to, while she's passing these mats out, you need to have 3 different colored mat pencils. You got 3 different colored mat pencils. I have that.
Evan, why are you playing with me?
Boy, you don't say
Okay, each will you come to the red line? I was about to say Evan. Okay, so let's look up here. Here's our map, correct? Okay, so triangular trade in the British colonies and West Indies are our blue, and that's that first triangle. So on your color doesn't have to be blue if you don't have a blue. Just one of your 3 colors. So you're going to create this on your map. You're going to include on there your rice, tobacco, indigo, and furs going from the British colonies to Great Britain. And then what do? They manufacture them in Great Britain. They ship them back to the West Indies as cloth and manufactured goods. And then they send some things back to the British colonies, and here that is sugar on this map. Sugar was a big deal that they were producing here in the West Indies and shipping it back to the British colonies. Oh, we've been doing this before. It's 1B and 2C's.
Does anybody have a pen?
Yes, I do.
Thanks. Y'all want a black pen now.
Okay. See if I can write with
That must be really difficult.
Okay, the next one we're going to look at here is your triangular trade in Africa. It's going to be the red arrows. You're going to go from our enslaved persons gold and pepper through the Middle Passage to the West Indies, ship things like molasses over to the colonies, and then your from our